The bank is announcing its interest rate decision for November. There had been speculation the Bank of Korea might hike the rate for the first time in 2018. We will let you know very shortly. Plus, President Moon Jae-in arrives in Argentina for the G20 summit focused on keeping dialogue going with North Korea. President Moon has one-on-ones lined up with various world leaders, including his US counterpart, Donald Trump. Our top story this morning, the two Koreas are starting their 2.5-week-long joint on-site inspections of railways in North Korea. Coming 4 months later than originally scheduled, the good news is that the two Koreas were granted sanctions waivers from the UN Security Council, as well as the United States, to move this project forward. Let's connect to our Unification Ministry correspondent, Oh Jung-hee, who's joining us on the line. So, Jung-hee, what do you have for us at this time?
Hi, Mark. South Korean researchers and train cars left from South Korea's northernmost Jorasan station about an hour ago. There are 7 in total, with a locomotive and 6 cars carrying oil and electricity, as well as facilities for the researchers who will basically live inside the train for 2.5 weeks. Seoul's Unification and Transport ministers, lawmakers, and rail officials gathered for a ceremony this morning to send them off. They expressed hope that the on-site survey will be a stepping stone to ultimately kickstart the railway connection project with the North.
Today's ceremony will be a signal of the two Koreas' co-prosperity through a railway connection and provide momentum to expand the Korean peninsula's economic reach to the Eurasian continent.
The government will prepare steadily to hold a groundbreaking ceremony within this year, as the leaders of South and North have agreed, and closely coordinate with related countries so that the railway connection project can go ahead with support from the international community.
Okay, so Jung-hee, we just heard from 2 South Korean ministers there, including the Minister of Unification. I do have 3 questions for you. How are the inspections going to take place? Secondly, once they're over, what can we expect to be the next step? And finally, we've been hearing about a groundbreaking ceremony, but is that going to go ahead as planned?
Well, Mark, first let me show you the map that I have here. The South Korean train cars will be crossing the border with 50,000 liters of oil and 300 kilowatts of electricity. At Panmun Station in North Korea, the South Korean train will link up with a North Korean locomotive and cars, and then they'll move together for 18 days, for 2.5 weeks, as they test the Western Gyeongui line first, and then the Eastern Donghae line. Now, this will be the first time in over 10 years that the two Koreas have checked the Western Gyeongui line, and the first time in history they've surveyed the Eastern Donghae line. As you've mentioned, the two Koreas had planned to hold a groundbreaking ceremony to connect and modernize railways and roads within this year. While the schedule's been quite delayed and the joint inspections are taking place much later than initially planned, the Seoul's Unification Ministry is still confident that the ceremony can take place before the end of this year. But it's widely seen that the ceremony is only for symbolic purposes, and Seoul also says the actual construction will proceed in accordance with progress in North Korea's denuclearization. Back to you, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Jung-hee, for that report. Extra incentive for the North to denuclearize then, if they can get their railways fixed up nicely. Now, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is now in Argentina, the second leg of his 3-nation tour that takes him around the world. He's in South America for the G20 summit and numerous one-on-ones with leaders from the world's leading economies. Diplomacy with North Korea and pressing the regime to abandon its nuclear program are expected to top his to-do list. Our Shin Se-min, who is traveling around the world with the president, files this report from Buenos Aires.
A packed schedule from multinational meetings to sideline summit with the world's movers and shakers who are in the process of gathering in the South American nation. Among a slew of other things, the focus for the South Korean leader is his administration's push to denuclearize North Korea and forge lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. One of President Moon's top priorities in Argentina is his sit-down with U.S. President Donald Trump. The two are set to discuss ways to try and lift growing uncertainties surrounding the stalled denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington. The South Korean leader also has meetings lined up with the leaders of the Netherlands and South Africa. Both are non-permanent members of the UN Security Council, and the Netherlands also sits on the UN's North Korea Sanctions Committee. And Seoul hopes the meetings could oil the gears of the denuclearization process and open up the possibility of lessening the crushing sanctions on North Korea. As for the G20 summit itself, under the theme of building consensus for fair and sustainable development, President Moon is expected to share his vision of a South Korea that is inclusive for all. The key is on what President Moon, who proposed lifting the sanctions on North Korea, would come out of a meeting with President Trump, as the two most heavily involved players in the peace drive look for ways to take denuclearization to the next level. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Buenos Aires.
So, as a follow-up to that report, South Korea's presidential office says details like the time, date and formality of the summit between Presidents Moon and Trump is still actually under discussion. A Blue House official says the White House suggested it be a one-on-one meeting with just the leaders and translators in attendance rather than an expanded summit with diplomats and security chiefs. While a one-on-one meeting would give both leaders the chance to discuss pending issues more frankly, the official said the formality of the meeting is still awaiting confirmation. But speaking aboard Air Force One en route to Argentina, White House spokesperson Sarah Sanders said the Moon-Trump summit would be a, quote, pull-aside rather than a formal bilateral meeting. And President Moon spent his first day in Buenos Aires visiting the city's Remembrance Park, a memorial for the victims of the South American country's so-called national reorganization process during the Dirty War. President Moon paid tribute to those who died and praised Argentina's efforts to put history right and hold those responsible for the atrocities accountable. The president also met with South Koreans living in Argentina and asked them to continue working as a bridge between the two nations. US President Donald Trump has abruptly cancelled his meeting with Vladimir Putin shortly after he told reporters he would probably meet with the Russian president on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Argentina. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Adam. Adam, tell us more.
Well, Mark, President Trump blamed the cancellation on Russia's failure to return ships and sailors seized from the Ukraine. That happened last weekend. Moscow has been facing a strong backlash for the incident off the coast of Crimea, with many Western leaders calling it an act of Russian aggression. Trump made the announcement in a series of tweets on Thursday, but he told reporters just an hour before the tweets that the meeting may happen.
I probably will be meeting with President Putin. We haven't terminated that meeting. I was thinking about it, but we haven't.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said President Trump made the decision on the flight to Argentina after consulting with various advisors and top officials. A spokesman for Putin said the Kremlin had no official information about Trump's decision. Although the leaders of the two countries may not be holding talks, their respective G20 delegates could be meeting in Argentina. Trump and Putin also may cross paths during the summit, and any small exchange between the two will likely be closely watched. Meanwhile, President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about a Trump Tower project in Moscow. He appeared before a federal judge in New York on Thursday, saying he was acting out of loyalty to Trump. Last year, Cohen told lawmakers that the Moscow project had ended in January 2016, just before the Iowa caucuses. But he admitted that the negotiations went on until June of that year. That was after Trump had clinched the Republican presidential nomination. Cohen said he also lied about his contacts with Russian officials. The real estate project ultimately fell through, but Thursday's revelations does put new pressure on President Trump, as they do suggest he was engaged in business dealings with Russia in the midst of his campaign. Trump lashed out at Cohen, calling him a weak person.
I don't know exactly, but he was convicted of various things unrelated to us. He was given a fairly long jail sentence, and he's a weak person. And by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. I mean, we were very open with it.
The UN's weather agency has released a grim prediction on what could happen to the world if carbon and greenhouse gas emissions continue to be pumped into the atmosphere unchecked. The dire assessment comes on the eve of a big climate conference in Poland. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
With COP24, the United Nations Climate Change Conference opening this weekend, experts are warning that global warming will lead to rising sea levels and a perilous food crisis.
And the sea level rise is anyhow going to be a threat for several coastal regions and coastal cities. And population-wise, we have largest amounts of population in big Asian countries, China and India, and there we have also largest part of big cities that are exposed to sea level rise. But we have those also in Europe, like London, or North America, like Los Angeles and New York, as well as big cities in South America, and a couple of them also in Africa.
That's not all. According to a report by the WMO, global temperatures are on pace for a 3 to 5 degrees Celsius rise this century, far surpassing the global target of limiting the increase to 2 degrees Celsius or less. Experts say it's crucial to limit the rise of global temperatures to 2 degrees to avoid more extreme weather, rising sea levels, and the loss of plant and animal species. Citing that the last 4 years were the hottest since records began in the 1850s, the WMO chief said with a possible El Niño, next year could be even hotter than 2018. With the rise in the mercury, the agency head said carbon dioxide levels are at their highest point in 3 million years, adding it could take thousands of years for the excess CO2 to disappear. With the most important UN climate conference since the 2015 Paris Climate Summit taking place in Katowice, Poland, one of the most polluted coal mining regions in Europe, the talks are intended to produce a rulebook on how to implement the Paris climate deal. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So we have this news just coming in regarding the rate decision by Korea's central bank. The Bank of Korea has decided to raise its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points to 1.75%. This at the central bank's last monetary policy meeting of 2018, and it marks the first time the BOK has lifted its key rate this year after hiking the rate by 1/4 percentage point last November. We'll have more details on this during our next newscast at noon Korea time. South Korea's 3 main indicators of industrial output, production, investment and sales all increased on month in October, the first time that's happened in 9 months. According to a government report on Friday, production for all industries rose 0.4% last month on increased metal processing and logistics production. Production in the manufacturing sector jumped 1%, while the service sector saw a rise of 0.3%. Retail sales, they edged up 0.2% due to rising consumption of automobiles and clothing. Facility investment jumped close to 2% in October, extending its gain to the second straight month. A group of now elderly Koreans who were forced to work for a Japanese firm during World War II have finally won their cases in South Korea's top court. On Thursday, the Supreme Court ordered Mitsubishi to pay damages to almost 24 victims. Shortly after the ruling came down, the Japanese government issued an angry statement in protest. Lee Ji-won reports.
After an 18-year legal battle, the Supreme Court decided on Thursday in the first case to uphold a lower court ruling ordering Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to compensate the 23 plaintiffs for unpaid work at Mitsubishi factories back in 1944. The court ordered the firm to pay around $71,000 to each of them, or in case they're deceased, their relatives. The Supreme Court reasoned that the 1965 agreement, under which Japan paid South Korea $500 million to normalize their diplomatic relations, did not terminate the right of individuals to seek reparations. In the second ruling, the court ordered Mitsubishi to compensate 4 elderly women and a relative of a plaintiff who has died. The plaintiffs first sued Mitsubishi back in 1999 in Japan for making them work without pay at a Mitsubishi aircraft plant in Nagoya in 1944. After losing their lawsuit in Japan in 2008, the plaintiffs filed another one in Korea in 2012. The Japanese firm has continuously appealed, but Seoul Supreme Court on Thursday upheld previous rulings that it is inhumane and illegal to force teenage girls to work at a munition plant. The ruling comes about a month after the top court upheld a 2013 ruling that ordered a Japanese steelmaker to pay each of 4 Korean plaintiffs for unpaid work during World War II. The case and the latest one have deepened the divide between the two countries. The Japanese government has once again strongly protested. Tokyo's foreign ministry summoned the South Korean ambassador to register its objections, and its foreign minister Taro Kono released a statement saying the ruling is unacceptable and goes against the 1965 agreement. Kono also strongly urged the South Korean government to take appropriate steps, or Japan do all it can, including an international trial, to defend what economic activities he said were legal. Mitsubishi said that it deeply regrets the ruling and that it will talk with the Japanese government to formulate a response. South Korea's foreign ministry said it respects the court's ruling. It urged Japan to stop overreacting and summoned the Japanese ambassador to object to Tokyo's strong words. The ministry also said it'll continue discussions within the government about a response to the recent forced labor rulings. It'll also work to heal the wounds of the victims while at the same time striving to forge a future-oriented relationship with Japan. 이지원, Arirang News.
There is just over 1 week to go until South Korea's National Assembly concludes this year's regular session. A plenary session was held on Thursday, with lawmakers passing some 60 pending bills, including legislation to toughen punishment for drunk driving here in South Korea. Kim Mok-yeon with the details.
After weeks of discussions, rival parties agreed to pass some 60 pending bills at a plenary session on Thursday. They include 2 revised bills that have been named the Yoon Chang-ho Act, named after a soldier who died earlier this month after being hit by a drunk driver in the southern city of Busan. The revised bills calls for a lengthier prison term for those who caused death while driving under the influence of alcohol. The current minimum sentence is 1 year, which will be raised to at least 3 years and up to life imprisonment. In cases where the drunk driver causes injuries, prison terms will range from 1 year to 15 years, compared to the present law, which carries a maximum sentence of 10 years with no minimum limit. Another key bill passed during Thursday's session was a revised law to tackle the increasing problem of revenge porn cases. The bill will now punish people who not only film such videos illegally, but also those who distribute them without the victim's consent, even if he or she agreed to its filming. Aside from this, bills on improving working conditions for part-time lecturers at universities was also passed, with a new law guaranteeing their contract to last at least 1 year. These latest developments came as part of bipartisan efforts to pass as many bills before the regular session ends on December 9th. Kim Mok-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's Interior and Safety Ministry held a competition on Thursday to gather opinions from citizens on how to make public services better. Around a dozen teams presented their various ideas as they competed for the top prize, which was a presidential citation. Yoon Jung-min with the details.
The South Korean government is seeking ways to encourage citizens' participation in their policymaking decisions as a way to achieve true democracy. On Thursday, the Interior and Safety Ministry hosted a competition in Seoul to gather ideas from the public on ways to improve public services. A total of 11 teams, including ordinary citizens and government officials from across the nation, presented their ideas. The goal of the event was to improve the quality of government services ranging from social welfare, local festivals, youth employment, to more. One team won the presidential citation and 2 teams were granted the Prime Minister's citation, while others were awarded prizes by the Interior Ministry. The teams discussed outreach programs to help people in need in their communities and ways to revitalize local festivals and other projects as well.
I hope our residents can enjoy a better, more positive life through our projects, although they're suffering from poor living conditions right now.
Local festivals are very common events anyone can enjoy, but there are a lot of problems too. We came up with the idea to solve such issues through the perspective of young people.
The ministry says heeding the public's voice is important for policymakers, as they can better determine what people want from the government. The ideas presented at the competition will be shared with other government agencies to improve quality of public services. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Good morning. Korea's southern provinces are seeing particularly bad levels of air pollution with dust alerts in effect. Notice how people in Gwangju and Daegu are breathing polluted air. That's nearly 5 times higher than normal levels. Meanwhile, those of us in Seoul, we're now breathing in bad air, so let's just check the levels before heading out today. Sticking in airflow will keep the polluted air around all day. And hope you're geared up a bit. We had sub-zero morning temperatures in the upper regions, including here in the capital. Well, readings will rise to above seasonal norms tomorrow, but that means high levels of fine dust in the capital area. And concern is on the rise as heavy air pollution will hit Beijing this weekend. Mostly sunny skies will send daily highs to the bearable side, Seoul getting up to 8 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And starting next week, it's going to feel very much like winter. Morning lows will plummet to below freezing, and lows will only get up to 0 degrees in Seoul by next Friday. So you might want to take out your winter jackets this weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV, and we'll have our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.